All right, so my name's Justin Chalfant. I work at Patch My PC. We're based out of Denver, Colorado. What we do, we author a third-party update catalog that essentially allows you to import pre-made updates that we create for you and inject those into SCCM so you can patch additional third-party products just like you would patch your Microsoft updates. So we currently support about 130 unique applications, and we'll kind of go through the process of what it looks like to use our solution, how we would publish updates, pretty much A to Z, and how simple that can be. The core thing here is that we're really helping you to save time because you don't have to worry about either packaging applications using the app model or the package model in Config Manager. It's just going to allow you to automatically get those and keep those applications patched and secure. So I'm not sure if any of you guys have seen any of my content as far as like YouTube videos, SCCM stuff, but I don't do PowerPoint. So we're pretty much just going to go from a technical perspective. Hey, this is our solution. This is how we set it up. This is how we publish and how updates sync over to SCCM, and kind of go through the process of what it would look like if you were to use our solution, how that would work for publishing updates. So with that said, I'll go ahead and get started. Just make sure we've got everything here. Looks like we do have audio. If any of you guys have questions on the phone, feel free to go ahead and just speak up during that. I'm not going to have the Skype window open for most of this, so if you do something in the chat, it might not get answered until the end of the session, but if you do want to mention anything, feel free to go ahead and cut in. So what I'm going to be showing you today is actually the 1806 release. Now, that's not required, so we can certainly do things with really any release going back to 2007. We can publish updates and sync them, but there's actually some cool new features that I'll kind of show you that came out in the 1806 release of Config Manager. So what we have going on here is just a clean site. We actually do not even have any updates syncing. So the first step that you would have to kind of determine is how we get the updates published. So there's really two options there. I'll cover both of those. One is going to be using our automated publishing tool, or you can use the new publishing feature released in the 1806 build of Config Manager. SCCM is still also supported. I probably won't be covering that today. Really the main difference between SCCM and our service or the SCCM console, there's a bit more manual effort involved for each time we release a catalog update for you to actually import and publish those. So probably one of these two options is what we see most of our customers going with at this time. So our publishing tool is just a small service that would run on your software update point. It's only about a meg. Really the core purpose of this is to just determine what products that we have within our catalog that you actually want to publish to your site. So I'll quickly kind of run through with what we support today so you just kind of have an overview of where to find that. So if we go to our website and look under our supported products, this is where you can find all the third-party applications that we allow you to patch from our catalog. So, you know, all the big ones you would expect are certainly there, things like Firefox, Java, Chrome, Flash, etc. For each of the applications we support, you can also drill down. We'll show you whether we have 32 and 64-bit support, and also kind of all the versions that we've added that we have within our catalog for you to publish. So the first thing that we have going on here with our publishing tool, we need to determine what certificate we're going to use. So whenever we publish updates to WSUS and then they sync over to SCCM, there is a trust level that has to happen there, and that's going to be by code signing the actual update that gets installed and then making sure your clients trust that. So it's actually quite simple. You really have two options here. We could either go through our wizard and create a self-signed certificate. That's probably going to be the easiest option if you don't have PKI set up in your environment. Or you could issue a code signing cert from an internal certificate authority or even a third party, depending on what you want here. In this demo, we'll go ahead and just use a self-signed one. And that's going to automatically generate that certificate that we're going to use to sign our updates. If you were using one from a certificate authority, we could just import a PFX file that you export for your code signing cert. So that looks good here. The next option, we would go through and choose, of the products that we support, which ones do you want to auto-publish to your site? So for this demo, what we'll do, we'll go ahead and jump over and get Java running. So we do have a machine in here that's running Java. We do also give you some options for updates that can be a little bit problematic if it's running. So for example, for Java, say we wanted to go in and kill the process before we actually run the update. So we do have the ability to come in here and say, hey, whenever Java is set to install on a machine that has an older version, let's go ahead and kill that Java process before we actually do that installation. What you also saw there, if you just want to skip it, so if they're running browsers or Java applets, it could basically just skip the install, and then when the client went through its next software update scan cycle, it would then reattempt and say, hey, is it now closed? And if it was, it would go ahead and start installing that. The other option here is we can choose whether we want to publish with full content or metadata. So for those of you that aren't really familiar with that topic, when we publish updates, we basically download the installer file. So for Flash, for example, we'd be pulling down that MSI that is actually the update. If you only wanted to get scan data first, so let's say you didn't know, like out of the 130 or so apps that were here, we could basically come in and change all of these to publish with metadata only. What that means is we would only get the scan data from our clients, but we wouldn't actually have to go through and download all the content, and then we could come back in here. One thing that our team is looking at doing is having like the ability, because you've already got the scan data in, so through hardware inventory for your SCCM agent, you already have a list of all the apps there. In a future update, we are looking at a way where we could basically analyze based on the supported apps we have, just light this up even before we start publishing updates to say, hey, for Adobe Flash, we detected 500 installs. So you can kind of get a good idea. Even before you start publishing updates and deploying them in your site, you would kind of know, hey, this is already out of my environment. Maybe I'll go ahead and check it and just do full content to get that running. So we got Java. Let's go ahead, and I think we have Firefox. I think we have a client with an outdated version of Firefox. So let's go ahead and get those two. And then for the Adobe products, what we'll do, we'll go ahead and enable all of them, but for this one, we're only published with metadata. So let's say we just wanted to get the scan results before we actually deploy these updates. So we go ahead and apply those changes. Now, with the publishing service, what's nice about this, I'm going to go ahead and run the scheduler now. So that's going to go get those updates starting to download and publish just while we're waiting. Everything here is going to be automated. So for example, let's say on average, we do about 3 catalog updates a week. Usually if a vendor releases an update before about 10 a.m. Mountain Time, we get that out in the same day. So usually we release about 3 p.m. Mountain Time. So we're pretty quick as far as turnaround time goes. And what's nice about the scheduling feature, you don't have to worry about manually coming back in here and doing any type of publishing. The scheduler, based on the products you enable, so in our case we had Firefox and Java, and we had the Adobe updates published. Let's say, for example, tomorrow a new version of Java comes out. Since we already have that product supported and enabled, it would automatically publish to your site and then just flow into SCCM. So you wouldn't really have to worry about coming back in here. This is kind of like a set it and forget it. This whole publishing tool is just to get that data automatically flowing into your site. The only time that you might come back is, let's say we add a new product that you want to publish. You could just load up the settings tool and then choose, hey, there's this new product. Let me go enable that for publishing, and then it would pick that up in all future versions. The proxy settings, not too much here, but I do want to kind of mention this email setting. So whenever the publishing tool publishes new updates to your site, if you want to get a notification saying, hey, this version of Java, this version of whatever app, any new app that meets your criteria, that automatically gets published in the future, you would just get an email saying, hey, this app and this version of the app was auto-published. I'll actually show you what that looks like. This scheduler should probably be done here in a second or two.
Can you do multiple recipients?
Yeah. So we could do a comma between the recipients if you wanted to add multiple people to get the notification about new updates being available and published to your site. Yeah.
While that synchronization is running, you do have a couple of questions.
Okay, great. Yeah, let's take a look at that.
So the first one is Patch My PC considered to be a partner catalog or a custom catalog for SCCM 1806?
Good question. So it is not a partner catalog. The core reason for that, we've actually talked a bit with David James to determine, like, could that possibly be like an option? The key reason now why we're not a partner catalog is because we are a paid subscription. So the catalog URL for each customer would be different. So that's one of the key reasons why we wouldn't be showing up like the HP catalog, for example, that would show up in the third-party catalogs node. So we would be considered a custom catalog. We'll actually go through the process of how you can add our catalog directly in the console as a custom catalog in 1806 as well.
Okay. The next question we have is Patch My PC similar to Shavlik and other products? Would you care to explain on some of the differences?
Sure. I think it would be best to kind of cover some of that maybe throughout the session of what we do. To be honest, I really don't know. Our team really doesn't pay that much attention of what Shavlik and others are doing. I don't think it's Shavlik. I think they've been bought out a couple times now. Really, the only extent that I know about them is I think they do some plugins that go into the console, whereas we basically have a standalone service that is facilitating the auto publishing of updates. But we are also compatible with the in-console publishing feature of 1806. But for the most part, we generally based what we're going to do as far as our product goes directly on feedback. So I can't really tell you, besides the fact that I know they do have an additional node in the console, I don't really know how they do things as far as the comparison goes. I think one thing that we try to focus on is keeping things simple from an admin perspective and getting it set up, and I think we do really good at that.
Another one from Skype. Does Patch My PC have an SLA?
Good question. So we don't have any official SLA as far as release goes. There are some factors that can play into testing with how fast it can get out. So for example, I'll go a bit more in the security aspect of what we do for each update. But we do run everything through virus total scan. So depending on whether there's false detection there, that could possibly delay it. But 10 a.m. is generally going to be our kind of time that if something's out before then, we almost always get that in the same day. So for big things like Java that have pre-planned releases, we're always going to get that the same day for those type of security updates. But turnaround time, it's almost always the same day as long as it's before about 10 a.m. So I think we do really well with that. No official SLA though. Yeah, so uninstalls do happen. When we do our testing, we do ensure that during the upgrade, any previous version is auto uninstalled there. So just a little background kind of showing you what happened here. So we can see that within the publishing service, it automatically went out and published all our updates. So let me just go ahead and see if we've got that email showing in to show you what that would look like. So here's the updates that we just published based on our selection. So this is the email that you would get if you enable that option. We're going to show you what updates were published with full content. So we can see that we did Java and Firefox here. We're also going to show you what updates were published with metadata only. So these are all the Adobe products that I enabled there. So this looks good. So at this point, what we would do next is go ahead and go over to our Config Manager console. So if we go ahead and synchronize our software update point, what's going to happen is Config Manager is going to synchronize with WSUS that we publish our updates to, and these updates are going to automatically flow in, just like any other software update that you would see from Microsoft. So that's one nice thing here. There's not really any different as far as managing and deploying updates for any of the third-party updates we publish from our catalog. It's the exact same process as what you'd be using today. So you can use ADRs, you can use searches. It's going to use your existing distribution points for staging out content, as well as your existing SCCM client agent to do the scanning. You don't have to worry about doing anything like software inventory, star.exe, anything like that. It's all going to be handled through the existing client software update point scans. So at this point, it looks like we've got our updates flowing in. So if I do a quick refresh here, we can see our updates kind of showing in here. Now, if this was the first time you ever published any updates from our catalog, after your first sync, you would just have to come into your software update point under the products and go ahead and enable the product for our software updates, which would be under Patch My PC. Now, one thing to note here is we do publish all the updates under a single vendor. The main reason we decided to go with that method is because there is a limitation on the number of products and vendors that can be published as a third-party update to WSUS. So we wanted to make sure if you're using other catalogs, like let's say HP, Dell, or Lenovo, if we listed everything out, we didn't want you to exceed that number and then have issues publishing updates. So at this point, I'll show you some new features with 1806. So prior to 1806, you would have to ensure that your clients trust your certificate and that you enable a group policy to allow them to install third-party updates. This would generally be done through a GPO, so you could enable a group policy. It's not really that complex. It's quite simple, but a lot of times config manager admins might not have the permissions to go through and start deploying GPOs. So being able to handle this directly in the console is super nice. So what we can do to enable third-party updates, if we go to our software update point, there's a new tab here called third-party updates. So first we're going to enable third-party software updates. That's going to allow the component to kick in and start syncing any partner catalogs if you chose to subscribe to them. But this is kind of the first thing. The second option is, do you want Configuration Manager to automatically manage the certificate that's being used to handle your updates? So I'm going to choose yes to that. Now, if you don't have any certificate created, so if this is you're initially getting set up with 1806, and if you want to use the SCCM console for publishing instead of our tool, this could actually go and generate that certificate for you instead of generating it through our tool. Since we already generated it through our tool because we were using that for publishing, and I'll go over some of the differences of what publishing looks like with ours versus SCCM, it's going to automatically read that certificate we created with our publishing tool. So it can still deploy that cert even if it didn't create it, even though it was created with our tool. So that's quite nice. So for the local group policy to allow third-party updates to install, there's actually a new client setting as well in 1806. So under our software updates, we're going to go ahead and look at the bottom option here to enable third-party software updates. So we can go ahead and enable this option and choose OK. So that's going to enable the local group policy that says to allow clients to install third-party updates from Microsoft intranet update locations. So that's essentially the updates that we're publishing to your site to allow them to install those. So with 1806, you don't even need GPOs to deploy your certs or the policy to enable. That's all done directly from the console. So pretty nice. So jumping back over. So we've got all our updates synced now. In our case, we're going to be using an ADR. So I have an ADR already set up. So if I look at my software updates, I'm just saying, hey, show me any updates from Patch My PC. So that's going to be the 2 updates that we publish with full content. So if an update's published with metadata only, one thing to note, your ADRs aren't going to pick that up because we don't have the content signed with your certificate. So in order to actually deploy updates through ADRs or really be able to download them in package, they would have to be with full content. So if you just wanted to get your scan data and you published a bunch of things with metadata so you can get the scan results, before you could actually deploy that, we would just switch that over to full content, and then your ADRs could then pick them up and deploy it. So in our case, we can see we have 2 updates here. One thing to note on the title filter, we do also have some migration updates. So that's going to include things for Java. So we can migrate from Java 6 and Java 7 to Java 8. So if you want to do like a major migration to a new major version of Java, we can facilitate that through a migration. And we also have a migration update for Firefox to Firefox ESR if you wanted to move to the ESR-based version. So in the title filter, I'm just saying don't include any of those in my ADRs. So we could certainly add multiple here, like if you didn't want to auto-deploy Java, for example, we could get pretty creative with how we wanted to auto-deploy these. So what happened on the config manager side, just like any other ADR, we automatically downloaded those 2 updates, so we can see that here. They're automatically being deployed, and they're already in our update package and going out to our existing infrastructure or distribution points for our clients to download. So that process is really going to be no different. What's nice about that, within our deployment, the ADR was, I'm making it visible, but of course you could do this however you're doing updates today. There's really going to be absolutely no different for what that would look like. So if you wanted, we could use maintenance windows. So if you're only installing updates during specific maintenance window times, all of that would still apply with our updates. Same thing with restart behaviors. So if a third-party update needed a restart, so if it was a restart exit code and you configured your restart time, etc., all of that would still apply just like any update that you'd be deploying today. So this looks good. It looks like we've got this deploying. So what we can do now is jump over to one of our client machines. I did see a question here. Yeah, so actually 1806 we can publish updates. I think we'll have time to cover what that looks like as well. But you don't need to wait to 1810. You can actually publish third-party catalogs with 1806. There is a small difference though, which I'll cover once we get into the SCCM portion of it. But jumping over to our client, what we're going to do is go ahead and do a client check-in. So I'm going to do a machine policy. check that in, and what we'll see here is we're going to start automatically downloading that deployment policy. So then if we come in and do a software update point scan, what's going to happen is, just like your existing scan cycles, we're going to start evaluating whether we need any of those third-party updates. So we can see that it's evaluating our software update group with 2 CIs, or software updates. So that's that update group that was auto-deployed from the ADR. Since I was showing notifications, it is going to give me that notification here in the taskbar here. So if I open that up, we're making it visible, so we can go ahead and see kind of what's going on here. Now, I am running an 1807 technical preview. I did notice it didn't look like our certificate gets auto-populated right away through policy. So just a quick workaround, I'm going to just restart the agent host. I know with 1806 it came right down. I'm not sure whether this is just something with our lab, but let me just do a quick restart of that, and then what we can verify is that our certificate got automatically deployed. So if I open my certificate store, we can verify that the config manager client automatically added that certificate for us in here. So let's take a quick look. Looks like it didn't get it quite yet here. Just do one more check-in. But while we're waiting for that, if we look at the local group policy, we'll go ahead and see if we can verify that our client enabled the, there we go. I'll show you the policy that automatically got flipped over for our 1806 client. So we look under Windows Components and then Windows Update. This is the policy that you would have to deploy traditionally from a group policy. So this allow signed updates from intranet update location. So we can see when we enable that client setting, our config manager agent automatically enable those third-party updates for us. So this looks good. Let me just see if that cert came over yet. Okay, do a quick refresh here. Looks like it hasn't flowed in quite yet. I might, I think I forgot to run a software update point scan. So when the certificate gets read, it's when we do a software update scan cycle. So let me just do one more sync here. And then what we should see is that it's going to automatically add our cert in and deploy that to our client. So I think that's why we haven't picked that up. So let's just run a quick look here. So here we can go. Now we can see that we've read our certificate, we added into the database, and at this point our clients would automatically get that certificate trusted because we enabled that option for it to manage it. Just for time's sake, let me just go ahead and manually export the certificate that we are using to sign these, and then bring that over to my client, just in case it doesn't pick this up in a minute. I do want to kind of proceed with how the installation would look. So here we go. Let me just do one policy cycle to see if we've got that new setting yet. Okay, let's do a quick look over here. Just do one more cycle here. And if it doesn't auto-populate it here, I'll just import this as a trusted cert. But I believe it's the updates. Okay, let's take a quick look. Refresh that. There we go. So now we can see that the certificate was automatically deployed. Sorry about that sync issue. I forgot I had to resync after enabling that. So the config manager client automatically pushed that cert, so we now trust the updates. So now on our config manager side, we can see we have these software updates showing up here. I'm going to go ahead and click install all. Now at this point, it's going to be no different than any other update that.
Education Executive Sales Line. My name is Tristan. Can I go ahead and get your first and last name, please?
I think somebody just went on the phone line. Okay, I think they're muted now.
How can I help you today, Dave?
I got it.
Okay, I think we got him muted. All right, we got him. So they're calling you out in the comments as well. Oh, no, that's not what I wanted. So on the client side, looks like we probably missed all the install from that, but we can go check this out. All right, so it looks like we have Firefox is already done. So what we had, Firefox 60, we automatically brought that up to 61.02. We did have Java 8 update 161. Looks like we're bringing that up to 181. In our case, we're only doing the 32-bit version because that's all I published for time's sake. But we can now see, hey, we've got Java 8 automatically updated to 181 for the 32-bit version because that's already published here. Now, obviously, if we did the 64-bit, it would have automatically brought that up as well. So that looks good. So that's really all there is as far as the setup goes. So we've got our updates publishing. In the future, they would automatically be kind of handled for that as well. Jumping over to show you some additional details that we give out. Here's an example of a newsletter notification. So you really have a few different options of receiving information about new catalog updates. Like I said, we generally do about 3 to 4 catalog updates a week just based on when vendors release updates. But if you subscribe to our email or RSS feed, you get data that basically looks like this. So for each update, for a catalog update for a specific day, we're going to give you information about the release notes. So if you wanted to say, hey, looks like there's a new update for Chrome, let me go ahead and open that up. You get some metadata about that, see kind of what that release was all about. If it's a security update, we'll also give you any CVIDs associated with that release that were addressed for the fix that we released in that catalog update. We'll also give you virus total scans. So for each binary that we release an update for, we're going to run all of those through virus total to see what type of detection you might get for that. We're going to publish that data as well. We could jump in and say, hey, show me the scan results for that Chrome. So this is going to link us out to the most recent scan data. It looks like this is actually our archive scan for when we did that. But if we wanted, we could point out to the most recent one and just see kind of what the latest virus total scans for each binary that we test. As far as security goes, the way that we ensure that if a file was to be changed on the server side, so let's say, for example, we're downloading updates from Adobe. Let's say for some reason something got compromised. If a file hash was different than when we initially created that update, the update's never going to publish. So when we publish the update, whether that's through SCCM, SCUP, or our publishing tool, we always verify the hash that was created when we exported the catalog and code signed our catalog always matches with the file that's actually being downloaded. So that's kind of one of the security things that go into place with validating that the actual update binaries always match with when we created those. So that looks good. Just jump over to one of our lab environments here. Looks like we're good on time. What I'll show you here is kind of a lab where we have a bit more data going on. So instead of one client, we've got about 10 or 15 or so clients here. And I'll kind of show you what the full catalog would look like being published. So within our software update groups, just like in our other testing lab, we're just using an ADR to automatically deploy these updates. So if I look at all my agents, just like any other software update group, we're seeing how many clients are compliant with all updates within our third-party group, and we're seeing how many clients are not compliant. We can then drill down into this group. So these have all our updates published. So right now we're close to about 250 actual updates. So this would include things like 32 and 64-bit versions, of course. So if we just kind of look in here, we can kind of see all the updates that are actually published to our site and being deployed through our update groups. Now, what's nice about this, we do, since they're just regular software updates that are basically being published, all the existing config manager reports can be used for compliance data. So there's actually a pretty cool dashboard that came out in 1806. But I do want to show you some of the reports that we also include there, because I know a lot of people aren't huge fans of some of the default reporting that's available. It's not really all that easy to kind of drill down. So we do have a dashboard. This is actually an updated version of one of the, I think it was actually a Microsoft engineer. He might be out of Charlotte, actually. He created a dashboard, and we've been maintaining that and using that for compliance reporting. So we've added support for Windows 10, Server 2016, as well as a few additional things that we've added in here. But what we'll show you, you could either run this for just third-party updates, or you could also include Microsoft and third-party patches within these dashboards. But we're going to show you basically your workstations and server count, so what your environment's looking like today as far as managed clients. We'll then show you compliance by month. So for example, we can see in August, we have 75 instances of updates that are either required or installed. Out of all those instances, we're only 16% compliant. So if we were to drill into that month, we're going to sort by the number of updates that are required on the most number of machines. So for example, we can see Good Sync looks like it's needed on 6 devices, same thing as Library Office. If we were to drill down into each of those updates, we'll actually take you in one of the native reports for that specific update, and then we could get details about what specific clients are missing, etc. So jumping back over, we've got a few other things on here as far as this dashboard goes. Get that loaded back up. So same thing for servers, we list it by month. We also give you details about overall compliance for workstations. So we'll break it out by OS so we can see, hey, for Windows 7, Windows 10, and Windows 8.1, what's our overall compliance for devices? Are any of those devices 100% compliant? So that's kind of the number that we're looking at here. In our case, we can see we have 2 Windows 10 devices. None of them are compliant with all the updates we have deployed. If we drill into those 2 clients, it's going to show us how many updates are missing, and then we could drill down to actually see the device and all the updates that are missing on that device.
Now that report is on the patch my PC, right?
Yeah, so this is just a report. It's something that comes with our catalog. You just run an installer, and then it will automatically upload it to your SQL reporting instance for Config Manager. So it can actually go directly into like the folder for your SQL reports. It's usually called like CM _ your site code. So for example, if I were to, let's see here. Now I ran it directly from the console because it's in that same folder, but if you actually open this in a browser, it's just going right to that Config Manager reports folder that's native to where your reports get installed through your SQL reporting services component.
We got some questions for you.
Yeah, questions.
Does Patch My PC enable new installations or updates?
Yes, good question. So the question was, I'm not sure if the voice is coming over the chat window, can we install base applications or applications that are not there yet? The answer to that is no, not today. It's something we're getting a lot of feedback about. There's not really a technical reason why we couldn't do this. It would actually be quite easy to make the installable logic more generic, but then we want to make sure that if we were to have an option to do base installs, we do it right. So for example, if we just enabled a software update as a base install, all your machines that even don't have it would start showing that as required. So depending on how you're reporting, that could potentially skew that off if you're not excluding those reports. So it's something that we're thinking hard about, like what would be the best solution for that? Would we go through the software updates engine and have different updates with more generic detection, and then you would just have to be able to deploy those to specific collections that you want that deployed to? Because obviously if you accidentally deployed those to a large collection and you didn't know the logic was more generic, you could possibly install things that you don't want to install. So we want to make sure, is that going to be something like automatically importing apps and creating those for you? Could we do it through the software update model? But no, we don't do it today, but that's probably the biggest question that we get. And we know it would provide value, so we are thinking how we could possibly do something with regards to the new installation for apps that aren't there.
Is there a way of removing old versions when you install the newer updates?
Yeah. So good question. So it was, is there a way to remove old versions when installing a new patch? So for every update that we release in our catalog, we do validate that during the upgrade, you don't have old versions left behind. So a lot of installers will just handle this natively. When you deploy the latest update, for example, they'll just update the files and bring that to the latest version. But we do always make sure in our testing that every update that we release is not going to leave old binaries and versions of an application, and we'll always update that for you.
Are there some particular third parties that are more problematic for that kind of behavior in your testing?
Yeah, good question. So the question was, are there any applications that can be more problematic during an upgrade with leaving versions? Yes. There's some applications that, if you like let's take Java for example. So they actually have a command line. I think it's called like remove old JREs. If you were to just run a default install and use like a /s switch and didn't know that, it would actually leave both. So we ensure that during that upgrade that we're taking out old versions of that. we're doing the right command lines there. But some applications can be a bit more finicky as far as whether they do upgrade that, but we do ensure that for all the apps we support during our testing, that we either get the right command line or we have some kind of method. So actually Skype's a good one. So the Skype desktop client, their MSI version always uses the same product code. So if we were to just deploy that, you would get an error message saying this product's already installed, you need to uninstall it first. So for that specific scenario, we're actually wrapping around that, calling the uninstall code during the upgrade, and then putting down the latest one. So there are a few. For the most part, I would say most applications actually do pretty nice job as far as doing a clean upgrade and getting those to the latest versions. There's not really that many that we really have to do too much modification to.
Can we use them in task sequence as well?
Yeah, so you can use them in task sequence. So it would just use the install software updates feature, and they would install through a task sequence. There was a question about desktop shortcuts. So when the application has a command line that allows us to suppress any desktop shortcuts put on the public desktop, we're going to include that in the command line by default. For applications that don't allow us to specify a command line for public desktop, we actually have a script that we can import as a package and program and make it recurring that will remove any application shortcut deployed from software updates through our catalog. So I did see that question here. But I do want to jump over to do a quick overview. I know we're getting close on time to kind of show you what's out in the 1806 release of Config Manager. So jumping over here, we've already enabled the third-party software update catalogs. So what we can do here, actually I think I am in the, one second, SCUP. Here we go. So what came out in 1806 was basically the ability to allow you to come in here and publish catalogs directly from the console. So you can kind of think of this as a replacement for SCUP, where you don't have to manually import your catalog updates and publish them from SCUP. You can do that directly in the console. I do want to cover kind of what that looks like for doing that through our catalog. So I'm going to go ahead and copy my subscription. We're going to go through and add a custom catalog. Now, one thing to note with the default or with the 1806 release of Config Manager, when you import a catalog, it does publish every update within that catalog. So if you take HP is kind of a good example of this. There's actually about 4,000 updates for that catalog. So just keep that in mind. If you do start publishing catalogs, it will publish all the updates within that catalog, so you may not want to have that much metadata coming through to your site. But one thing that we did do within our catalog is allow you to basically add an additional parameter, and I'll show you what that looks like. So when we add our URL, if you don't want to import every product we have, so it's about 130 products or about 250 specific updates, including 32 and 64-bit, if you only wanted to kind of drill down and say, hey, I only want to publish Java or 7-zip, etc., what we allow you to do is append additional product parameters to your catalog URL and only import those updates. So let me just go search out for one. I'm going to do CCleaner in this instance. So let me copy that. Coming back to where we're adding a custom third-party catalog, I'll paste that at the end. So we can see we have our catalog and we're saying only import where product is CCleaner. So I'm just going to go ahead and append this here. We'll call it patchmypc-CCleaner. CCleaner for the description. And just move this guy over here, do next here, and then we've got it added. So we'll go ahead and come back into our console and we'll go ahead and subscribe to our catalog. So if we come here, we're going to subscribe. What that's going to do is going to go download our catalog, and we need to verify that we trust the certificate used for that catalog. So we're going to go ahead and view the cert. We can see it's from PatchMyPC. We trust that. We'll go ahead and accept that and then do next. So that's how we ensure that we trust, and that's going to allow Config Manager to auto sync all the updates within that catalog, and that happens every 24 hours. So there's actually a new component in Config Manager that handles this. I'll kind of show you what's going on the back end. So if we go ahead and look at that. The key difference between the Config Manager in-console publishing and our publishing tool is that when Config Manager goes out, we can see it's downloading our catalog, and it's automatically publishing the CCleaner updates only because we defined that parameter. When we publish updates from the console of SCCM, it does only publish with metadata only though. So if we come in here and synchronize our software update point, we're going to see these new CCleaner updates coming into our console automatically. So if we go ahead and look at our sync manager, that's going to show WSUS syncing to config manager, and we should see these CCleaner updates that are going to flow in here in 1 second. There we go. So there's the CCleaner update. So in order to actually deploy that CCleaner update, if you're using the SCCM publishing, we would just have to come back in here, right-click on CCleaner, and then choose to publish the content. That's going to actually initiate the component to go out and download the CCleaner update and then publish it with your certificate. So we can see it's out here, it's downloading, so that looks good. Now it's publishing, so this looks good. So when we talk about the publishing service that we offer versus at least the 1806 build, you wouldn't really be able to have full automation with the in-console publishing because you would have to right-click the updates after the initial sync when they come down with metadata and then publish them with full content. So if we come back into our console now and we do a refresh here, we actually will have to do one software update point sync again so it actually pulls in that it's now full content. So if we come back to our sync manager, what we'll see is the CCleaner update. Now that it's published, when we run a sync, it's going to then have full content. So at that point, your ADRs could pick it up, and then you could download it to an update package and auto-deploy it. But you would have to kind of right-click and publish the binary. So with our publishing tool, we're really at a point now where that can be fully automated. We can publish all our content with full content initially. With Config Manager, it's really nice because it will auto-sync all the updates, but they will come in with metadata, and there's just one step. Now, we have talked to David James. He's actually posted some things on Twitter. They are looking at improving this scenario at some point in the future. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like. I know we have David Stewart in the room on the SCUP team, so nobody bash SCUP too hard. It's a great product. It's just the manual importing is, I think, why people wanted that config manager integration, so it could be more automated. So even with just the release of 1806, there's a ton of value here. We're going to automatically sync all our new updates with metadata. At this point, I just want to kind of go through the difference between that and the service. It's really just this one click. You would have to right-click and publish an update if you're using the 1806 feature. But I think that's most of what I had. I know we've had a ton of questions coming in, so let's go check out the chat window, see what's going on here. Have you been seeing anything, Jamin, that stands out here? Yeah, good question. Which one here? I was actually looking at Brian's. Okay. Our features terminated the process of skipping the install. All right, are the feature for terminated?
And you guys, the
Oh.
folks on the call can come off mute and ask questions.
Yeah, come off mute if you have anything here, but I'll address Simon's question now. That's a good question. So the feature of terminating or skipping a process is unique to the publishing service today. The main reason with that is because when we have our publishing tool, we kind of own that code base, so we can do some things that would be kind of hard to do. Like we were actually talking about this, like for example, filtering. It would be hard for the product group of SCCM to have some type of filtering in place instead of just injecting the whole catalog because they're not going to know how vendors alter that. So same thing with the publishing service and skipping the updates. Now, in order to actually do that, you just come in here, you right click, and it does retain that setting. So what we can know, if you choose the kill setting for any future version of Java, what we're essentially doing on the back end when this is enabled, we're appending an additional parameter to our installer that lets it know to kill the process. So this would be unique to our publishing tool. With that said, we do want to try wherever possible to make things on par to give you the ability, if you wanted to use SCCM, for it to be as full feature as possible. So today that's not available, but what we're looking at is we might have like an additional parameter like the product parameter that says something like and kill or something like that, kill process. And then if you choose that, we'll give you an additional, or we'll give you a separate catalog that already includes that switch. To kill the process. So today, this would only be available in the publishing tool to kill or skip, but we do want to look into ways to also make that available if you're publishing directly in the SCCM console. The next question was from Brian. Is there, the way SCCM works is for any update that it publishes, it needs to ensure that it's trusted for the actual update binary file. If there's no code signing certificate, SCCM is going to say, hey, I don't trust you at all. It's going to fail to publish. So there's only 2 updates in our catalog that we know of today that the vendor doesn't code sign their installer files. One of those are 7-zip. Firefox actually isn't an issue. They do code sign. There's one other one. It's a more, I would say, less used app. I forget what it is. But we are tracking those 2. So we really have 2 options here. Since SCCM is not going to allow you to publish updates that are not code signed for the installer file, we either need to get the vendor to sign their installers. That would obviously be ideal. Almost all vendors are doing that these days. Or the other option would be code sign them using a code signing certificate that we use and basically host that binary when allowed on our server. It would really be the only workaround to that. So we're actually actively looking into that. That's a great question. So today, if you were trying to publish 7-zip directly from SCCM, since that binary is not signed and we haven't converted to our cert and they're still using an unsigned file, that would fail today. But we do have this on the radar to figure out what method could we talk to the vendor to see if they can get their installers code signed, or would we just host these and code sign them when allowed from us? Yeah, so there's a question, what are your plans for the product with regards to editing rules and killing the process? Really, we want to make things as simple as possible. That's always what we've designed. We want to make it simple. So for example, killing the process, we wouldn't want to necessarily have you going in and having to do things like add custom command lines for the installer. It would really be, hey, could we add additional options? For example, let's say you wanted desktop shortcut capabilities. If that's something we were adding, we would like to make that just a right-click option on the update and say, hey, do desktop shortcuts. Whatever customization, we'd like it to be as simple as possible by using like a right-click action here.
So I can expand on that. Aaron is asking, on the software update dashboard summary, it's currently queued for both workstations and server. Do you have a report that separates that out?
Yeah, good question. So the question was, can we exclude servers and workstations from the dashboard? The answer is yes. So we do have the ability to come in here based on filtering. You could say, hey, only show me workstations. Now in this case, it's just going to remove the servers, so it's just not going to show any managed if we filter servers out. So if we look here, when it refreshes, I might have to look at what my collections are actually doing here. I don't know if this is just workstations. But yeah, for the reports, you can filter by collection. So if you wanted to exclude servers or workstations or even specific collections to only get compliance data based on that collection, you would have that ability to filter by the collection. Was that all the questions, or?
That was all the questions from the audience.
Okay, cool. I think I covered the console. Anything I missed, David, that you can think of? Is that pretty much covered kind of the whole publishing in 1806? Not really, pretty simple.
We just had a few more questions coming in.
Okay, a few more questions. Let's see what we got. Oh, cost. Yeah, good question. Yeah, that's just me in general. I don't really think too much about pricing and cost and things when doing this. So we have 2 pricing SKUs. We have one for SCUP only, so that's going to be $1 a client annually. So we do have a min of 500 clients. So if you just wanted to manually import and publish catalog updates using SCUP, that's $1 a client. Like I mentioned, SCUP, it would require you, whenever we release a catalog update, which is usually about 3 times a week, you would have to go into SCUP, import the catalog, and then choose the new updates you want to publish and kind of manually walk through the wizard to publish those updates. So from an admin side, that would be a bit more time consuming, but it is cheaper, so that's $1 a client. The $2 per client annually option, that will give you the automation piece. So that would allow you to either use our publishing tool or the SCCM console. The main reason for the pricing difference for SCCM versus SCUP, There is a new catalog format, so we have to do a lot more for each update around code signing certificates, as well as we have the ability to selectively import by product. So we manage a separate catalog for each product now, so we can have that filtering capability in SCCM. So that $2 option would include either of those two, and we don't really care what you choose there. For example, say you wanted to start with our publishing tool because we give you the ability to do the full content initially, but maybe a future version of SCCM, you can, maybe there's a property on a catalog or some type of feature where it can auto-publish with full content the first time, and you just want to switch everything over to the console. That's totally fine because the metadata is exactly the same there, as long as we went there. So that's kind of the pricing difference. Yeah, so I think that's that question.
Richard has identified that he has Patch My PC installed, but he does not have the dashboards. Is he missing anything?
Yeah. So Richard, shoot me an email, justin@patchmypc.net. So the dashboard is, it's a separate installed in the MSI because we connect into the SQL reporting instance. So you need to tell it what your actual server name is. So just shoot me an email and we will, I'll get you the info for that install. Another great question, do old updates get superseded by newer updates? Yes. So whenever a new catalog comes out, I don't know why I keep clicking Outlook. Whenever a new catalog comes out, we do automatically expire previous versions. So if we come in here and look at what we have going on with some of our recent catalog updates, so we'll just look at this RSS feed. Let's look at this one back, look at this guy. So with each catalog update for new product, for new updates of existing products, we do, if we come in here, look, we automatically expire the previous versions. Now we do have an option if you want to delay that. So by default, we're going to expire updates right away. So the old version will get marked expired in Config Manager. It will automatically be purged out based on like a week schedule is I think what the WSync Manager component does. Now let's say that you had a long testing cycle. So Google Chrome, for example, it's usually about once a week. They come out quite frequently. So let's say that you wanted to keep that previous version active because you have a long testing cycle. In that case, we could come into the publishing tool and delay the expiring of that update for up to 30 days. So you could basically have a few different versions. But the default setting will automatically expire any older versions when a newer version comes out.
Do old updates automatically get superseded whenever the newer ones hit?
Yeah, I think that's what I just kind of covered there. So yeah, the old updates will actually get expired. So we expire them and then they're flow out of your console and get deleted through the normal cleanup task that expired updates do.
Now I see that this is mainly SCCM, but anything with Azure and Intune?
Not today. So the question was any integration with Intune. Not today, but we are staying open to like whether we could use what APIs might be available in the future for us to do like application patching. Today we would be relying on Config Manager for publishing and deploying those updates. But good question. It's something that we are going to actively, be looking into because we know that's a big product. A lot of people use that for managing devices as well.
And another thing that's pretty big that with our customers is reporting. And would that be able to integrate with cloud app security or security sync? I think it's security sync.
Yeah, so the question was, could that integrate with a security, like a third-party security reporting? Does that product support, are you using Config Manager at all today?
No.
Okay. So if you're not using Config Manager at all, I'd probably say no. All the compliance for reporting is saved in Config Manager though, so if you're doing anything today with exporting compliance data for any other products, like pushing that out to another data source, all of our data should go with that as well. But I'm not familiar with that product, so if you're not using Config Manager, no, I don't think it would be able to kind of push into that third-party product for reporting security. Any other questions in here? I'm not seeing anything on the chat that I haven't addressed. Have you seen anything, Jamin, that we haven't covered? I think we've got it all.
We hit them all.
All right, so that looks good then. Any other questions in the room, or are we all set? Okay,
We're all set.
so we are, just from a pricing perspective, with any user groups we do, as well as MMS and a few other things, if you do decide to use our solution, we are doing 25% off for any of the groups for people listening here. So if you did want to get a quote, just be sure, if you come in here and say, request a quote, just in the comments, just be sure to mention that you're at the user group, take 25% off, and we'll be sure to include that just directly on the quote. But did you want to wrap up, Julie, and then I'll...
Yeah, so thank you, Justin, for coming.
Yeah, great. Thank you guys for having me.
And doing this, we've had some really great, 25% off for 1 year or forever, right?
Yeah, good question. Good year.
How
One-
often do you come to our meetings? And,
So-
talk?
So first year would be for the user group option. Now, depending on size, like as you get in larger sizes, we do want to make sure that we can work with you there as well, because obviously pricing, as you get to large numbers, it certainly can become more expensive. One thing when I kind of founded it, the reason I started off pretty low, I don't think that giving you the ability to patch third-party products should cost as much as in some environments, like you could hire somebody for actually creating applications and doing things like that. So yeah, as size goes up, we have obviously recurring discounts that we can do. Education, we'll also give discounts there as well, and that would be, throughout any year that you renew in as well.